Welcome to Workforce Central, the official podcast of the National Association of Workforce Boards. Stay tuned as we explore the latest resources, thoughts, and trends in workforce development. And now, here's your host, Ron Painter.
Welcome to Workforce Central, the official podcast of the National Association of Workforce Boards from Washington, D.C. I'm your host, Ron Painter. Lots of folks in America are diagnosed. Lots of folks in America have disabilities. And it's my real pleasure to be welcoming to the show today Jennifer Laszlo Mizrahi, who is the president of RespectAbility, to join me in talking about the issues.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really a delight.
You're welcome. And let me give you some background. Jennifer is RespectAbility is a nonprofit organization that you helped co-found. You've led national polls and brought significant visibility to the issue of America's 56 million people with disabilities. That's not an insignificant number. Jennifer is the co-author of a toolkit on best practices on employment for persons with disability and frequently hosts webinars on this topic. She has published dozens of op-eds and publications on disability issues, including in USA Today, Huffington Post, The Hill, and other publications. Dyslexic herself, she also knows what it means to be the parent of a child with multiple disabilities. Previously, she has worked for the White House with a number of U.S. senators, worked in foreign elections for prime ministers and presidents around the world. She is an expert in strategic communications, political strategies, and in public policy issues, including international issues, and lots of involvement in political campaigns. Again, Jennifer, welcome.
Well, it's great to be here because this audience is an audience that really matters. It's people who are engaged in making people's homes and dreams possible. Your hopes, your homes, and your dreams, because jobs are everything. Jobs are dignity. Jobs are independence. Jobs are friends. So this audience is very, very important to me.
Now, this is an issue, disability and employment. This is an issue that doesn't come to you as some sort of research project, right? This is something you've experienced.
I am really passionate about this because I know that the stigmas around people with disabilities are so significant that people really think that people with disabilities can't produce. But the fact is that people with disabilities are sometimes the very best person for the job. Stephen Hawking, he's a wheelchair user, but what if you didn't hire him because he's a wheelchair user when he's literally unlocking the secrets of the universe? If you look at, people who have Asperger's, like Albert Einstein, for example, would you not hire him because he's not so good over the water cooler with his social skills? I mean, really, people with disabilities can offer a lot to an employer, but unfortunately, only 30% of them in America are in the workforce.
30% of the 56 million.
30% of those who are working age. It's even smaller of the 56 million. There are about 20 million working age people with disabilities in America. 30% of them are working, 70% of them are not. 11 million of them are living on government benefits. And each and every year, 300,000 Americans with disabilities are leaving school to go into the workforce. Only most of them are never getting a job.
Let's talk more specifically about young people. The Innovation and Opportunity Act, the I&O, spends a lot of time talking about youth, but then also a lot of time talking about access and opportunity for individuals with disabilities. Historically, we've not done so well with that combination of youth and disabilities and employment, have we?
That's right. And in fact, really, it's been a disaster, to be quite honest, because the scenario has been, let's let the school system deal with it first, and we'll only get to the workforce system later, instead of having them partner together. So what do I mean? A young person with Down syndrome, autism, blindness, who's deaf, they can stay in public school until they're 21 years old. And then the school bus stops coming, and they have no place to go. So they're sitting on mom or dad's couch, and they sit there until they have to prove that they're incapable of ever working before they get services, which is crazy. And then over that time frame, their get up and go skills really degrade. And then it can be years until they get to the one-stop shop or to the American Job Center or the Voc Rehab office, and people say, well, here's how you can change your font on your resume. Well, your resume says nothing because you have no job experience. So the change that what this new legislation brings means that you can fuse the strengths of the workforce system with the school system to really also bring in other private sector partners and employers for internships, for apprenticeships, for early opportunities that will enable these young people to go straight into the workforce, which is where they belong.
We have a sense in this country that we don't do so well on career guidance in general, and for a variety of reasons. It's another show. But for young people with disabilities, what's your observation of how well we do around what happens in career guidance there?
So let me give you an example of a very specific situation. Let's imagine that you have a young person with Down syndrome or autism who has a significant intellectual disability. Maybe it's because they were poor and they have lead paint poisoning, for example, when they were a kid. So maybe their IQ is only 70 or 80 or 90, and they're not going to get that high school diploma that we know would help them a lot. Legally, they can stay in school, as I said, until they're 21, which is usually what happens. If instead they enter a program called Project Search. Project Search now exists in 43 states. And what they do in that Project Search is that 1 hour a day, they're doing career building. They're doing that, discovery process. They're learning about resumes. They're even actively looking for a job. But essentially, it's their last year of school. They're working at an actual employer in an unpaid internship. But they're treated as if they're an actual employee. They're doing real work. So it might be they spend 3 months doing house cleaning in a hotel or a hospital or a nursing home, or they're in the kitchen. They're doing, food prep, or they're washing dishes, or they're doing another kind of job, doing groundskeeping. They have an opportunity to be exposed to a number of different kinds of jobs. The employer has no obligation to hire them at the end of this apprenticeship program. They have them there for the school year. But what we're seeing is that 70% of these individuals, these are kids with very low IQs in many, many instances, people who everyone said will never amount to anything. They're getting great jobs. They're getting benefits. They're getting vacation time. They're getting health care. 70% of the young people going into this program, 70% are getting jobs, paid, competitive, integrated employment, making at or above minimum wage. It's fabulous. And it's the experience of the apprenticeship and the internship that is giving them the opportunity to really see what it is that they want to do.
So it's lessons that we've learned kind of across the board: work-based learning, connecting people to the employer who is willing to invest either time, money, resources into training that labor force.
That's absolutely right. But it's also looking at the assisted technology, because frequently people are coming job ready, but people have low expectations for people with some of the physical differences. I'll give you an example. It used to be that somebody who was deaf, to really function in a workplace, they needed an ASL, a sign language interpreter. But with the new technology, they don't need that anymore. You literally can take a $30 piece of software, it's called Dragon, you put it on your iPad, you walk around with your iPad. When somebody wants to talk to you, they talk into the iPad puts it to text, and it's just captions. You've got live captions. It's not as perfect for a meeting when a lot of people are talking. Maybe occasionally you need to bring in a sign language interpreter, or you just say to people at the meeting, hey guys, really, don't talk over one another because we have to wait for the captions. But the technology costs
for those 5 minutes of the meeting that actually are critical.
The technology costs you almost nothing. Likewise, people who are blind, people used to think, oh, well, you need Braille. Because they're blind, you need Braille. Well, not anymore. Every single computer that you buy, whether it's from Apple or it's from Dell or whoever, it has assisted technology built into it automatically. They press a button and they can read everything that you send them. So long as you set up your documents in a way that it's screen reader accessible, that's what it's called, which is very easy to do, people who are blind can excel at the highest level. And so it's really changing those expectations.
Let me step out for a second and remind folks that you're listening to Workforce Central, the official podcast of the National Association of Workforce Boards from Washington, D.C. My guest today is Jennifer Mizrahi, who is president of RespectAbility, and we're talking about persons with disabilities, more specifically youth. Jennifer, so with the assisted technology, with things that have changed, what do you observe is missing, or what's the mistake that is being made that you see that's pretty common? How do we, if you look at the 80-20 rule, what's
I think that the first thing is that people are being reactive instead of proactive. They're waiting for somebody to come to them at the American Job Center, the one-stop shop, which is really a mistake. Because with people with disabilities, you know where they are because they've already been identified through the public school system. And so if you interface with your local public school system, you can know who are the kids who are highly gifted, who also might be on the autism spectrum, or maybe they use a wheelchair. You know who might be getting remedial services because their IQ is lower, for example. So don't wait for them to come to you. You reach out to them and create some opportunities. That's the first thing. The second thing is that you need to understand that all federal contractors, which is 20% of the economy, now have a new regulation that they're expected to have 7% of their workforce be people with disabilities. And that's in every job category. That's from the person who's opening the mail or sweeping the sidewalk to literally in the executive suite who's managing the operation. If it's Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman, it's the engineers. So it's taking a look at the federal contractors because there's tremendous opportunity and creating partnerships to say, hey, look, the baby boom is aging. You probably are about to lose a bunch of employees because they're going to retire on you. Who are you going to need to onboard? What kinds of talents and skills are you going to need? And then having that conversation with the school about where can I find that talent and what do we need to do to get these things to align?
Data tells us that persons with disabilities are pretty loyal employees.
That's right.
Is that borne out in your experiences, in your travels?
There is tremendous amount of data around this question, particularly for some of the lower level jobs. So for example, if you look at the distribution centers of the big box stores, if you look at Walgreens or Walmart, or if you look at Best Buy or Office Max, some of their very, very best workers are people who are on the autism spectrum or Down syndrome who just love a job where they know the people and they know the routine and they don't want to change their job. So Walgreens has made hiring people with disabilities part of their for-profit strategy because they have found that when they hire other people, that as soon as they get a different job, they leave them. Same with Walmart. They see people with disabilities, they're good at their job, the safety is the same, very good safety records, but that they don't turn over. So it saves a tremendous amount of money for the company. And that's really a win-win. It's win-win for the company, for the person with the disability, and it's also, frankly, win-win for the taxpayers. Because unlike other populations that you're working with, people with disabilities can live on government benefits. And that's expensive. It's terrible if you're the person with a disability because it's only $14,000 a year, and plus the Medicare, Medicaid piece. But, the taxpayers would like to save that because over the lifetime, the work lifetime of an individual, it's $340,000. It's a lot of money.
That's more than we would pay at some public institutions, isn't it?
That's right.
That is a staggering numbers. Say that again. What do you guys estimate, or when your RespectAbility is looking at this, what do you say to me as a policymaker around what for lack of a better term, what the savings are.
Right. It's not even a hypothesis. I've done the meetings with the governors. I've already met one-on-one with 42 of America's governors on these issues. And if you've got a young person who leaves school with a disability, they're 21 years old, and they go on government benefits, and they're going to sit on mom's couch until mom dies, and then they're going to sit on their brother's couch, or they're going to be institutionalized. The out-of-pocket for that individual is going to be $340,000 before you have the cost of living increase, and before you give them the Medicare, Medicaid, healthcare piece, and before you think, well, they won't learn independent living skills, so we might have to pay for them to live in assisted living or in a senior home. You have literally thousands and thousands of young people with disabilities who, because they don't have the family support to take them in, are literally living in Alzheimer's units. Taxpayers are paying for this. And I must say that if you are 25 years old and you're living in an Alzheimer's unit, that is a pretty terrible life. That is a really gross mismanagement and horrible affront to justice to put a 25-year-old living in an Alzheimer's unit because you haven't thought to engage the workforce board and engage the employers in enabling that person to succeed so that they can be independent.
You mentioned earlier, you mentioned earlier the psychology of sitting on the couch, the kind of social skills, the interaction start to decline. This isn't really different from other populations,
Correct.
if you will, who don't have access to employment, right? I mean, we're
Correct.
not talking about something that is, you have to design a whole new system, or you have to think about it differently. I mean, this is something that's pretty common, isn't it?
Ron, you're absolutely right. I mean, the couch is the enemy for people who want people to succeed economically. So clearly volunteering and working for free is much better than sitting on the couch because you're elevating your skills, your expectations, your social connections, and it can be a pre-employment way to get into the workforce. So you're absolutely right. The couch is the enemy. Opportunity is key. Internships, apprenticeships are really critical to the success pipeline that we want to see for young people with disabilities. But let me just also add that a lot of people, when they think about poverty, they have a picture in their mind, and their picture is an African-American young person who's living in the inner city. But if you actually pull the numbers, people with disabilities overall in that same age category have more poverty than African Americans or Hispanics. Their gender, also more so than women. So we are the poorest of the poor, and in many cases, we're the same person. It's the African American young person who's been coming out of foster care who has a disability. Maybe they have ADHD, maybe they have dyslexia or dysgraphia, and it was never fully diagnosed and addressed. If you look at what happened with Freddie Gray, this young African-American man who was shot and killed by the police, or he was killed by the police in Baltimore, a lot of people said, oh, it was just a racial thing, because he was black. Well, you know what? He also is a young man who experienced lead paint poisoning from growing up in a house that had lead paint when he was a kid, and his disabilities, his learning differences were never really addressed appropriately to get him engaged in work and in a better future. So a lot of people have been thinking about people coming out of the correction system, coming out of foster care by race, and not realizing, wait, there's another part of that individual that we're going to have to take a look at. What are the disability issues that they might have that we might need to address and think about? And what are the strengths that that person have that we can really focus on building up so they can have that successful career? Because we don't want just a job. We want a career. We want a great future.
Are we doing better at identifying the disabilities and identifying pathways to independence, if you will, or self-sufficiency?
Ron, we're doing a lot better, but part of it is the democratization brought to us by the internet, that you can literally go online with different symptoms and say, what am I seeing here? And you can find free websites like understood.org, which talks about all the different learning issues and gives you solutions. If you're at a workforce board and you've got a young person with a disability and you say, you know what, I've been doing workforce issues for decades and I'm really good at that, but I've never dealt with X disability. What kind of accommodations do I want? There's askjan.org, and it's free online from the government, and there's someone you can email, and there's someone you can talk to, and they'll give you free advice to help you sort through what you can do. So the internet has been a real help in this, and it really makes it so that you can get the expertise that you need no matter where you live.
What kind of changes? I mean, one of the things that the INO does is talk about workforce development as a system.
Right.
And not just about a defined activity like skill training or whatever, but talks about it as a system, and including all of the pieces that allow us to get competitive in the labor force,
right,
and literally get out of our house and get to the job, or stay in the house and have a job. What are the major changes that you really think we need to see for people with disabilities to have access and opportunity?
Well, high expectations is the most important thing. To make sure that you understand that people with disabilities, overall, they want to work. They want the hand up. They don't want the handout. There are some who want to just live on benefits, but we've done a lot of polling. That's only about 30%. 70% want to be working. So high expectations for them is number one. Number two, it's to really get out of the silo, because in the past you would say, okay, I'm going to take that individual and put them in voc rehab. We'll just refer them over there. But that is no longer allowed under this new system. And I think people should celebrate that, because you can really break out of your silo and put things together in ways that were completely unprecedented. You can take money from SNAP, from TANF, from Medicare, from Medicaid. So it's not just the workforce innovation dollars that you're using. You can really put together a plan that looks holistically at what are all the different pipelines of funding that you can use to make sure that there's a great outcome. But at the end of the day, I think the employers are critical. They've got a talent need. In the disability space, there's a great partner. It's the Business Leadership Networks, the USBLN. There's a chapter in almost every state. Those are the companies that are really at the forefront of doing this very well. It's Comcast, Northrop Grumman. It's companies like the banks. JP Morgan is really an exemplar employer. EY is an exemplar employer. People don't always realize that these top tier companies really value this talent pool. Ernst & Young, it's a huge consulting company with over 150,000 employees, but you know who it was founded by? Young. Young was deaf. So it's in their DNA of their company. They don't look at the package as the person comes in. They only look at the talent the person has. So there's some companies just really and truly get that.
So as we focus more on the consumer, what do I bring, what do you bring to the table? And,
right,
and we focus on those competencies, that really begins to open up lots of different windows, I hear.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. Richard Branson, who founded Virgin Atlantic. People know Virgin. I mean, they're the ones going to, put people, private people are going to be able to go do space travel because of Richard Branson. Richard Branson is so dyslexic that he was thrown out of school, never completed his high school diploma, and went on to form this multi-billion-dollar set of enterprises that he's running. If you look at Sheldon Adelson, who runs these huge casino structures, he's worth, I think, over $20 billion. He is a wheelchair user. If you look at Steve Wynn, who has the Wynn casinos out in Las Vegas, also a billionaire, he is blind. You have to think about the talents that people with disabilities can bring to the table and really harness those talents so that they can really enable the employer to succeed. I really liken it to what I call the Jackie Robinson strategy. Jackie Robinson was this African-American baseball player who completely transformed America because he went to play baseball as the first African-American in the major leagues. Well, here's the thing. Nobody felt sorry for him because he was black. He was the best player on the team, and he helped bring them, the World Series, and he was a really incredible class act. Really fine human being. So I always like to take a look at the situation and say, don't take the person with a bad attitude and put them in the job first at the employer. Don't have their first impression be a bad impression. Look at your pool of talent of people with disabilities. Find the ones that also have wonderful abilities. And the ability might be that they're just very kind, very thorough, very consistent, and will do the job well. and put those people in the jobs, and then the employers will come back for more.
Awesome advice. Jennifer Mizrahi, President of Respectability, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you all for joining us. You've been listening to Workforce Central, the official podcast of the National Association of Workforce Boards from Washington, D.C. And for NAWB, I'm Ron Painter. Thank you.